How can anyone, whether they want to work in a language school or privately from their own laptop anywhere in the world, create a rewarding and impactful career teaching English as a second language, even if they are just starting out or have no teaching experience or ability? Hi, my name is Lynette Kim, and here on the TESOL Talk podcast, I aim to answer that very question. Hi, Jane. How are you today?
Fine, thanks.
That's good. And thank you so much for coming on TESOL Talk again. It's really good to have you here. Your knowledge and experience is always a bonus. So, Jane, today I want to talk about a warning for people who are considering or people who are new to teaching English as a second language. Now, I know that sounds very ominous, and I am being a little bit controversial here, but there's there's a phenomenon that happens in the ESL industry, particularly with people who teach overseas. And I don't know if you've clued on yet to what I'm talking about, but in my experience, when I've taught overseas and I've come back to Australia and working here in Australia and meeting a whole lot of ESL teachers here, I have noticed that there is a large percentage who are actually married to foreigners that they met overseas. Now, have you noticed this yourself?
Yes, and that happens a lot because foreigners are loved overseas, especially guys. I don't know what it is, but yeah, they just seem to be attracted to the guys. So, yeah, not surprised. I mean, we used to get teachers basically stalked by students in a good way. I mean, in terms of, we'd come out of, because most of the schools were in the shopping centres, and we'd come out at night, finish our shift, and there'd be like a whole lineup of girls going, good night, sensei, because I worked in Japan. It's like, teacher, good night. So, foreigners are popular overseas, definitely.
And I mean, a lot of these teachers, they're not marrying their students. They meet people overseas because teachers are so accepted into the community, and it's a highly respected profession. So you just tend to meet people all the time. But there is a warning too when you're working in the industry in regards to dating students. So you have more experience with this, Jane. So what have you found in this instance?
Well, I've never dated a student, for starters.
No.
But there's usually a company rule, and when you're traveling overseas working, you really need to make sure that you're clear on what the regulations are. So the company that I work for, it was a no-no to date your students. So a lot of the times,
Before we go any further, we are talking about adult students here. We're talking about
these are all adult students. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. And the thing is, and so most of the time people would, obviously they'd find that attraction, wouldn't do anything about it. And obviously if they just became just as a friend, would perhaps meet outside of the school, and eventually, and this has happened, eventually the teacher has moved on from that particular company, and then they've fallen in love and have got married. And then eventually they'll come back to Australia or whichever country to have their family. The ones who are left behind for example, in Japan, a lot of the Australians who marry Japanese will stay there for years, and years until the kids have grown up, or they'll have their own businesses. That's what they tend to do. They'll leave the current business because obviously it's not acceptable in those companies, and they'll create their own English schools and set up themselves. And because they've got native speakers of that particular country, like Japan, they'll have Japanese wives. The Japanese wives will assist in building that little school for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen this in South Korea as well. So, and I mean, all right, I'll admit I married a Korean. So what do you do with that?
Was he your student?
Hi, it's Lynn here. I hope you're enjoying this episode of TESOL Talks.
I just want to let you know that if you're interested in teaching English as a second language, the best way to get started is by getting your TESOL certification. And I recommend a TESOL Australia course because, well, I wrote them. I put everything that I wished I had been taught when I was first teaching into the TESOL Australia courses, along with a lot of other information and training. If you have any questions or you need someone to help you figure out a plan to create a rewarding and impactful career teaching English as a second language, simply go to our website, tesolau.com. That's TESOLAU.com, and fill in the inquiry form to get professional advice on your goals and exact situation. Now let's get straight back to the episode.
No, he wasn't. Although when I met him, he couldn't speak English very well, and I did help him with his English. But this was actually in the middle of Australia, in the outback, in the middle of nowhere. So he wasn't a student of mine. Like, I didn't work in a language school and meet him. We just sort of met by chance in the middle of Australia. He was opal mining, and my parents were opal miners, and I went to visit them, and I met him, and he wanted to learn some English, and I helped him. And actually, it was really funny because I'd been, helping him with his English for months, and, just doing, not because I hadn't actually started teaching English as a second language at that point. I'd only really privately tutored kids who needed help with phonics and reading. So, I just thought, he's very nice, he's very friendly, he's very cute, but not, not my type, obviously, because, he couldn't speak English well. And to be honest, I had been married before, and I was like, never again. I wanted to be a businesswoman. I didn't want to be married. So, I'd helped him with his English for a time. And there was this one time that he said, I want to tell you something, after I'd been helping, we'd been discussing English and I've been helping him with conversation. And I said, yep, okay, sure. And he goes, oh, I love you. And I'm like, what? And I cracked up laughing, and he looked really offended, and I felt really bad. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Okay, have a look. So I got the dictionary, and I showed him the different forms of love. And he's like, yes, that's it. And he pointed to romantic love. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, could have crawled under the table. I was so embarrassed. And I'm like, no, it can't be possible. And he's like, yes, it is. So, for the next couple of weeks, we argued about why it couldn't be. And I explained to him constantly, I'd been married before. I wasn't doing it again. I wasn't having a man tell me what to do. And then, I knew that, Asian people can be very expressive. And I just thought, he doesn't realize what he's saying. He's never been married before. And it was interesting. This sort of back and forth went on and everything for, a number of weeks. And then he had to go back to Sydney. And it was after he left that I actually started to really miss him. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we'd spent, almost every day together for months. And now he's not there. And then he started ringing. And then, I went to visit him and his sister in Sydney, and yeah, that was it. Never looked back after that. But yeah, it's quite interesting that this can happen. But I've met heaps of teachers married. Like, what percentage would you say marry foreigners?
Well, this is just hearsay, really. Probably half at least. And you
Yeah.
see them here in Australia. They've been overseas teaching English. Yeah, so most of the time I was, oh, so were you an English teacher? Like, oh, yes, we met overseas. And you're like, oh, okay.
It's true. I
It
mean,
is a
I've
common
had,
joke. It's like, oh, was she your student? Or was he your student?
I think, in two English schools in Australia, in Queensland, that I worked in, the academic managers were married to a foreigner that they met overseas. I'm pretty sure at least
Yeah.
two of them, possibly three. How about you?
Yeah, but actually, most of the teachers I know have married someone from
Yeah,
overseas where they were teaching.
I
Most of
think,
them,
yeah,
if they've been overseas, they usually have a partner from overseas if they've
yeah,
taught overseas.
yeah, their culture. I think when you're overseas, it's so exotic, and it's just everything's so different. And because overseas, as I said, teachers are so highly regarded. So, when people meet you, it's like, it's very easy to get to know people. Whereas, here in Australia, meeting Westerners, you meet them through friends or you meet them out somewhere, but, it's a lot, it takes more time. Whereas overseas, I think these things tend to speed up a little bit too. But yeah, so that's the warning. Like if you go overseas and you're teaching in a language school, it's definitely a no-no. You can't date your students and you should not. And you need to be aware of that. However, be aware that, you're going to meet a lot of foreigners and, people are going to be interested in you. And, you've got to sort of go, wow, do I want to live and experience another culture and be married in another culture? So for me, it was wonderful.
It's a
I mean,
big, it's a big
yeah,
change, that's for sure. Like, I don't think people realize it, that the culture, because initially when you meet, everything's, everything's wonderful, isn't it? So
it's like
it's the honeymoon of a relationship. It's only, I think, it's when the kids come along and things are
uh,
different, the culture then really sinks in as to how you raise children. But anyway,
yeah,
that's another thing.
that's a
But
whole other thing.
yeah, it is. But in terms of the other thing we haven't mentioned is like when you are overseas, like when I was in Japan, for example, there are places like, what we consider bars or pubs. They call it izakayas over there. And there's usually like a place where all foreigners go and meet. So it's fantastic in terms of the experience of meeting other people. You meet people from all around the world. You meet people, and it's funny because you meet the Irish and the people from England and Canada and America, but you also meet people who might be, like from South Africa, for example, or, so everywhere from around the world you can meet people, and it's fantastic. And a lot of times too, they tend to joke around with your English, especially the Canadians and the Americans. They sort of dig at you, especially if you're from Australia and you're saying water, okay, and the water, and they're like, what water? And they go, water, or data instead of data. So you tend to have this lunch or dinner with these other foreigners in the country, and they always have a good dig at you. So
Yeah,
yeah, it is a fun time though. So
true. It's a great way, like to meet lots of people, like you said, and make friends. I think when you're a foreigner overseas, like English teachers tend to be very friendly to each other,
mm,
and tend to make friends with them much. It's very easy, and there's a lot of camaraderie I experienced.
it
Like
is. Yeah,
I was standing
definitely.
in line in in a donut store, and in front of me, a couple of people down, I noticed that there was a blonde guy, and he was with another girl, and I didn't know where they were from, but he happened to look back and see me. So because it was the easiest way to let him know I was Australian, I went, g'day, which I would never do normally. But here in Australia, I wouldn't say that. But he laughed straight away. He goes, oh, you're an Aussie, me too. And, he was from Queensland as well. And so we got talking. His name was Mitch. And he ended up working at our school in South Korea. Like I offered him a job and he already works somewhere. And he was actually going off to Canada to do some traveling. But he said that, if he decided to come back, and he did, he called me from Canada. He said, hey, I'm coming back. Is the job still open? So it was just so easy to meet, so relaxed and fun. So, and I met heaps of people by my husband. He would actually complain to me, "Don't say g'day. It's not for women." And I'm like, "No, forget it. I'm Australian. I can." Yeah, so that's the thing with marrying a foreigner. But yeah, quite interesting. So yeah, I've met people from different places too. It was really a
Yeah,
great experience. Yeah.
it is, and it is sad when you all have to, or when people have to go back home. I still remember when I left, I just hired out the whole Italian restaurant, got a busker from outside, and they agreed to busk within the restaurant kind of thing, with all the foreigners. And I think, yeah, it was like I had 85 people come was bigger than my own wedding. It was amazing, you know, and that's the thing, that all the teachers, you know, they all want to say goodbye to you, or they all want to, you know, wish you luck. And a lot of them will give you their addresses as well so that you can visit them when you go to, you know, if you start traveling, you've got somewhere to stay. That's the other positive thing you can get out of it.
Yeah, they're very hospitable. The same thing. You know, I had people like they were from America, from Canada, the UK. You know, and they're like, oh, if you ever come over, look us up, you know, come and stay. Like they would say, you know, come and stay for a week or so. And, you know, it was just amazing. I had these offers of free accommodation that you wouldn't normally have.
No,
Yeah.
you know, stranger danger. But not when you're abroad. Anyway.
It's a very open and friendly industry, in my experience. What about you? Did you feel that too?
Yeah, it was. It was very open. And, you know, everyone seems to be willing to help you out as well. Like when someone's leaving, for example, and you're coming in, they're like, oh, you're a newbie. Here, you know, have this furniture, or, you know, have our rice cooker, or have this. You know, they're willing
Yes.
to give you this stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's so, and a lot of times they'll give it to you, for free.
Yeah.
Not
It's
necessarily, yeah. So.
inside community automatically.
That's right. And they'll tell
Yeah.
you all the, you know, oh, you should go to this shop, or this restaurant's really good, or yeah, they'll it's sort of like a handover in a
Yeah.
sense. And
I
so like, here's the best place to go. Don't go to that place. You know, it's a little bit iffy, or they'll, it is, oh, it was, that time was really great.
Yeah, look, I'm sure it's still the same, but you know, it is a lifestyle. I think for anyone wanting to travel and, you know, needing to earn a living traveling, honestly, teaching English as a second language is such a fantastic lifestyle for plugging straight into the culture and the community and meeting people, you know, and meeting other Westerners as well. You know, it is just amazing. And you know, even if you're going to a country where, you know, perhaps you don't meet the requirements to be an official teacher, you can always private tutor, you can always be teaching
Oh,
online.
it's easy to get private tutoring. Like really easy, because you're a native speaker, people actually will approach you and say, hey, do you teach privately, all that kind of thing. But you got to be careful too. Just depend again, if you are working for a certain company, and it depends on what you've signed. Sometimes it does say, you know, you're not allowed to tutor privately. So just be careful on that one. Like in terms of, you know, if you are going to do it, like shh. Yeah, just to be aware of that one too, depending on the
Yeah,
rules.
I was meaning it for the case where people perhaps they don't have a degree and they're going to go to Thailand or somewhere, and you know you don't want to private tutor so much because you don't want to break your
Your
visitor
visa.
agreement. But if you've already
Yeah.
got your own teaching online that you're doing and you're
Oh, well,
getting
then that's different, isn't it?
yes, well, that's totally different. So it
Yeah.
gives you the ability to do this. But, you know, you can still plug in to all the websites for the foreigners in the country and all the teachers and meet them and still
Oh,
get,
yeah.
people who are, there teaching English as a second language. Like there's still that sense of community.
There is definitely. And, you know, and you find out where everyone hangs out, and that's where you meet the other
Yes.
foreigners. And that's, you know, and if you are teaching online, it's your own business, then yeah, you're free to do whatever you want to do, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, so
Mm.
that's the warning. If you're single, be careful because you can become an object of desire. You really need
Oh,
to
definitely.
yes, be firm, be strong, and yes, and yeah. So just be aware of that. But also, you know what? A lot of people, end up meeting the loves of their lives and are happy and have wonderful lives too. So,
That's
there's
true. Oh, and the
nuggets.
other thing is, be prepared if you are going to marry someone. Be prepared to live there for a long time, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
unless they're willing to come back to your country. But just be aware that sometimes it's, you know, they'll say yes, 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 but it's
Yeah,
really hard to actually pull them away from their family. And it's a huge decision. It's a huge change in their lives, when you start talking about like forever kind of
yeah.
things.
Definitely. Well, I lived in Korea twice for 2 years because my husband's missed his family and wanted to spend time with them. And so, we've done it twice now. But, every few years he's gone home for a holiday. I haven't always gone with him. But, he does. I think for certain cultures, it's much more of a pull than, others. So, it is something to be aware of for sure. But anyway, look, great chatting with you, Jane, and interesting information as always. And thanks for the warning.
Anytime.
Yeah, people need to be aware of, the ins and outs of teaching overseas and what you can and can't do and what you need to watch out for. But we will definitely have you on again soon to hear more about your experiences and your wise advice. And for everyone there, thank you so much for listening in again to TESOL Talks podcast.
Bye for now.